The morning sun barely reached the narrow streets of Westbrook, where old apartment buildings stood shoulder to shoulder like tired soldiers. In one of these buildings lived Lily, a 17-year-old girl with determined eyes and a gentle smile that hid years of worry. Every morning, Lily woke up before the sun to prepare breakfast for her mother, Nora, whose hands shook too much these days to hold a pan steady. The doctors called it early onset Parkinson's, but all Lily understood was that the medicine cost more money than they had. "I made you toast and tea, Mom," Lily said, placing the tray beside her mother's bed. Nora's face brightened at the sight of her daughter. "You should be focusing on your studies, not taking care of me," Nora said, the same words she spoke almost every morning. "I have time for both," Lily replied with her usual confidence, though they both knew her grades had been slipping. "I'll be back after my shift at the cafe." The Golden Cup Cafe sat at the corner of Pine and Fifth Avenue, right where the struggling neighborhood of Westbrook met the gleaming financial district. It was a place where worlds collided, where people in $1,000 suits ordered coffee from people who counted coins for bus fare. Lily had been lucky to get the job. The manager, Mrs. Chen, had known Nora years ago and had a soft spot for the family. "Be quick, be polite, and never let them see you're tired," Mrs. Chen had told her on the first day. Lily had followed this advice perfectly for 6 months now. The morning rush was always the same. Business people with eyes glued to phones, barking orders without looking up. Lily had mastered the art of being invisible while being efficient. By afternoon, the cafe quieted down. This was when the regulars came in, the ones who actually noticed the people serving them. Lily was wiping down tables when the bell above the door chimed. A tall man in a perfectly tailored navy suit walked in. Something about him made everyone in the room straighten their posture. It wasn't just the suit or the confident walk, it was the way his eyes took in every detail of the room with calm interest. "Black coffee, no sugar," he told Lily when she approached his table. "Right away, sir," she nodded, sneaking another glance at him. That's when she noticed it, a gold ring with an emerald stone surrounded by tiny patterns that looked like waves. The ring caught the light in a way that made the emerald seem alive. Lily nearly dropped the coffee pot. Her mother had a ring exactly like that one. She had always treasured it, keeping it in a small wooden box most days because she was afraid of losing it. "It's all I have left of a better time," Nora would say whenever Lily asked about it. When Lily brought the man his coffee, she couldn't help staring at the ring again. It wasn't just similar to her mother's, it was identical. The same unusual wave pattern, the same deep green stone. The man caught her looking. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice deep but not unkind. Something pushed Lily to speak up, maybe desperation, maybe fate. "Hi, sire, my mother has a ring just like yours," she blurted out before she could stop herself. The man's expression changed immediately. The calm confidence vanished, replaced by shock and then intense curiosity. He put down his newspaper and looked at Lily properly for the first time. "That's not possible," he said slowly. "This ring is one of a kind. My father had it made specially." "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything." Lily backed away, suddenly afraid she'd be fired for speaking out of turn. "No, wait." The man gestured for her to stay. "What's your name?" "Lily, sir." "I'm Thomas Green," he said, offering his hand as if they were meeting in a boardroom rather than a cafe. "Tell me about your mother and this ring." Lily hesitated, but something in his eyes made her trust him. "Her name is Nora. She doesn't wear the ring much anymore. She's afraid of losing it. But she's had it as long as I can remember." Thomas's face paled slightly. "Nora," he repeated the name as if testing its weight. "And your last name?" "Wilson. We're Lily and Nora Wilson." Thomas took a business card from his pocket and wrote something on the back before handing it to Lily. "This is my personal number. Would you ask your mother if she would be willing to meet me? It's important." Lily looked at the card. Thomas Green, CEO, Green Enterprises. She suddenly realized who she was talking to. The man owned half the buildings downtown. As Thomas left the cafe, leaving his coffee barely touched and $100 bill on the table as a tip, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change forever. What she didn't know was just how deep the connection between her family and Thomas Green went, a connection that began decades ago with a forbidden love and a promise symbolized by an emerald ring. Lily clutched the business card all the way home, reading Thomas Green's name over and over. She had seen his face on magazine covers and billboards around the city, but meeting him in person felt unreal. And that ring, the exact match to her mother's most treasured possession, what could it mean? The bus ride to Westbrook felt longer than usual. When Lily finally reached their apartment building, she took the stairs two at a time, her heart racing with questions she couldn't answer. "Mom, you won't believe what happened today." Lily burst through the door, finding Nora sitting by the window with her knitting needles moving slowly in her trembling hands. "What is it, sweetie? You look like you've seen a ghost," Nora said, putting down her work. Lily sat beside her mother, still catching her breath. "I met someone today. A man wearing a ring that looks exactly like yours, the emerald one in your wooden box." The color drained from Nora's face. The knitting needles slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. "What man?" she whispered. "His name is Thomas Green. He's that businessman who owns all those buildings downtown," Lily explained, pulling out the business card. "He seemed really shocked when I mentioned your ring. He said it was supposed to be one of a kind." Nora's hands shook more than usual as she took the card. "Thomas Green," she read aloud, her voice barely audible. "I never thought—" She didn't finish her sentence. "Mom, what's going on? Do you know him?" Lily asked, watching her mother's reaction with growing concern. Nora stood up shakily and walked to her bedroom. She returned with a small wooden box that Lily had seen 100 times before. Opening it carefully, she revealed the emerald ring nestled on faded velvet. "This ring has a story, Lily. One I've never told you," Nora said, her fingers hovering over the emerald as if afraid to touch it. "I always said it was from a better time in my life, but I never explained what that meant." Meanwhile, across town in a gleaming skyscraper, Thomas Green sat in his penthouse office, unable to focus on the stack of contracts before him. His mind kept returning to the girl in the cafe and her impossible claim about the ring. He swiveled his chair to face the wall-sized windows overlooking the city. Somewhere out there was a woman named Nora Wilson who supposedly had an identical ring to his. But how could that be possible? Thomas opened the bottom drawer of his desk, the one with a special lock that only he had the key to. Inside was a small safe. He entered the combination, 12 to 785, a date he would never forget. From the safe, he pulled out a faded photograph in a silver frame. The photo showed a handsome man in his 40s with the same strong jawline as Thomas. He was laughing at something off camera, his hand raised just enough to show the emerald ring gleaming on his finger, the very same ring Thomas now wore. "Dad, what didn't you tell me?" Thomas murmured, running his thumb over the image. Richard Green had been one of the city's most respected businessmen until his sudden death 30 years ago. Thomas had been just 8 years old when he lost his father. Everything he knew about Richard came from his stern grandfather who raised him afterward, or from news clippings that praised his business acumen. The ring had been given to Thomas on his 21st birthday, along with a letter from his father that simply said, "This ring represents the most important promise I ever made. Wear it with honor." Thomas had never understood what promise his father had referred to. Now he wondered if he was about to find out. He picked up his phone and dialed his most trusted private investigator. "Jack, I need everything you can find on a woman named Nora Wilson living in Westbrook. Late 40s to early 50s, probably. Has a daughter named Lily who works at the Golden Cup Cafe. And Jack, this is urgent. Personal urgent, not business urgent." Back in the small apartment, Nora was struggling to find the right words. 28 years ago, I worked as a secretary at Green Enterprises, she began slowly. Not for Thomas, he was just a little boy then. I worked for his father, Richard. Lily's eyes widened. "You worked for Thomas Green's father, but you never told me." "There's a lot I never told you, sweetheart," Nora said, her eyes filling with tears as she finally touched the emerald ring. "And I think it's time for you to know the truth. But first I need to know, did Thomas want to meet me?" Lily nodded, suddenly understanding that whatever connection existed between her mother and the Green family, it was something that had shaped their entire lives from the shadows. "Yes," she answered softly. "He seemed desperate to meet you." "Mom, what happened between you and his father?" Nora took a deep breath, the ring now clutched tightly in her palm. something that was supposed to stay buried in the past, but it seems the past has found us anyway. The next evening, Lily nervously straightened the faded curtains in their small living room. Thomas Green was coming to their apartment, a place that could fit inside his office bathroom, she imagined. She had called the number on his card yesterday, and he had agreed to come immediately, his voice tight with what sounded like barely controlled emotion. "Mom, are you sure you're ready for this?" Lily asked, turning to Nora, who sat rigidly on their worn sofa, wearing her best dress, a simple blue one she saved for special occasions. "No," Nora admitted honestly. "But some things can't wait any longer." She touched the emerald ring now on her finger. She rarely wore it, but today it seemed necessary. A knock at the door made them both jump. Lily opened it to find Thomas Green standing there, looking both powerful and somehow vulnerable in his expensive suit. He held a small leather folder in his hands. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he said politely, but his eyes moved past Lily to where Nora sat. The moment their eyes met, the room seemed to fill with 30 years of unspoken words. Thomas stared at Nora, then at the ring on her finger, his face showing a mix of disbelief and recognition. "It really is you," he said quietly. "I brought pictures, but I don't need them now. I remember you from when I was a boy." Nora stood slowly, her legs unsteady. "You were 8 when I last saw you. Always reading books too advanced for your age." Thomas smiled faintly at the memory. "My father encouraged that." "Yes, Richard always said you would change the world someday," Nora replied, her voice soft with remembered affection. "Please sit down." Thomas looked uncomfortable on their shabby sofa, but not because of its condition. It was the weight of questions pressing down on him. "I need to understand," he began, opening the leather folder. "My father gave me this ring on my 21st birthday. He had it made specially, at least that's what my grandfather always told me. But you have its twin." He looked at Nora's hand. "How is that possible?" Nora took a deep breath. "Because they were made as a pair. Your father had them created when he asked me to marry him." Lily gasped. Thomas's face froze in shock. "That's impossible," Thomas said, but without conviction. "My father was married to my mother." "Not when I knew him," Nora said gently. "Your parents had separated. He was in the process of divorce when we met. I was his secretary, and everyone said it was inappropriate, but we fell in love." Thomas pulled a photograph from his folder, the same one he had looked at in his office. "This is the only picture I have where he's wearing the ring." Nora touched the photograph tenderly. "I took this picture. It was at the lake house, summer of '94. Thomas's hands trembled slightly. "If what you're saying is true, why did he go back to my mother? Why did he never mention you?" Nora's eyes filled with tears. "He didn't go back because he wanted to. Your grandfather, Howard Green, called me to his office one day. He told me that if I didn't leave, he would destroy Richard's future in the company. He said Richard was meant for greater things than a life with a secretary." "That sounds like my grandfather," Thomas said bitterly. "And you left? Just like that?" "I had no choice," Nora whispered. "Howard threatened to ruin any chance I had of working anywhere else in the city. And," she paused, glancing at Lily, "I was pregnant." The room fell silent. Thomas looked at Lily with new eyes, seeing perhaps for the first time the shape of her jaw, the curve of her brow that matched his own. "Are you saying—" Thomas couldn't finish the question. "Richard never knew," Nora continued. "I left him the ring and a letter explaining why I had to go, but apparently he never got it. A week later, I read in the newspaper that he had reconciled with your mother. I was heartbroken, but thought he had chosen his family over our love. He died 6 months later," Thomas said quietly. "Car accident." "I know," Nora replied, wiping away a tear. "By then I was living in a different city, already showing with Lily. When I read about his death, I nearly lost her from the shock." Lily stood frozen between them, struggling to understand what her mother was saying. "Mom, are you telling me that Thomas's father was—" Nora looked at her daughter, love and regret mingling in her eyes. "Yes, Lily. Richard Green was your father too. You and Thomas are half-siblings." Thomas stared at Lily, seeing his father's eyes looking back at him. The emerald rings gleamed on both his and Nora's fingers, finally reunited after decades apart, just like the family they symbolized. The room fell into a heavy silence. Lily sat down slowly, her legs suddenly too weak to hold her. The world as she knew it had just turned upside down. Thomas Green wasn't just some rich businessman, he was her brother. "I need some air," Lily finally said, standing up and walking to the small balcony that overlooked the street below. The night air was cool against her hot face. Thomas watched her go, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. He had come here looking for answers about a ring, and had instead found a sister he never knew existed. A sister who had grown up in poverty while he had enjoyed every privilege money could buy. "Why didn't you ever try to contact the Green family?" Thomas asked Nora quietly. "After my father died, after my grandfather passed away 10 years ago, you could have come forward." Nora shook her head sadly, and said what? "That I was your father's secret love. That Lily was his daughter. Who would have believed me? Your family lawyers would have crushed us." "I would have believed you," Thomas said firmly. "The ring is proof enough. It's just jewelry, Thomas. Expensive jewelry, but still just an object. Your grandfather could have claimed I stole it." Thomas ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that Nora felt her heart ache. "We need to be sure," he said finally, "for all our sakes. Would you and Lily agree to a DNA test?" From the balcony, Lily turned around. "A DNA test, like on those TV shows?" Thomas nodded. "It's simple and quick these days. A cheek swab, results in a few days. I have connections that can make it private and fast." "And what happens after?" Lily asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "If it shows we are related, what then?" It was a question Thomas hadn't fully considered. What would change? Everything. Nothing. He looked at this young woman who might be his sister, working in a cafe to support her sick mother while he ran a billion-dollar company from a penthouse office. "Then we figure it out," he said simply. "Together. As a family should." 3 days later, Thomas's private doctor confirmed what they already knew in their hearts. The DNA test showed Thomas and Lily shared a father. They were half-siblings with a 99.9% certainty. Thomas arranged to meet them at a quiet, upscale restaurant where they could talk privately. He arrived early, securing a corner booth away from curious ears. When Lily and Nora arrived, he noticed Lily looked like she hadn't slept. "Are you okay?" he asked as they sat down. "Just processing," Lily replied. "It's not every day you find out you're half-billionaire." She gave a small laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I brought something to show you both," Thomas said, pulling out a thick photo album. "These are pictures of my father, our father, that my mother kept hidden after he died. I found them in storage last year, but never really looked through them until now." Together, the three of them turned pages filled with moments from Richard Green's life. Nora pointed to a photo of Richard on a sailboat. "He loved the water," she said softly. "Said it was the only place he could truly think." Lily studied a picture of Richard holding a young Thomas on his shoulders at what looked like a fair. "He seems kind," she observed. "His eyes are smiling, not just his mouth." "He was kind," Thomas confirmed. "At least to me. My grandfather was the hard one, all business, no warmth. After my father died, that's all I knew." As they continued through the album, Lily noticed something change in Thomas. The stiff businessman who had first come to their apartment was softening with each memory shared. "You know," Thomas said, looking at Lily, "you have his laugh. I heard it when you made that joke just now." Lily smiled, surprised and touched. "Really? Mom always said I laugh like a brother, my Uncle Pete." "Maybe both," Nora suggested. "But your determination, that's all Richard. He never gave up on anything he believed in." Thomas closed the album gently. "There's something else we need to discuss. Lily, I want to pay for your college education. And Nora, I've arranged for you to see the best neurologist in the country for your Parkinson's." The offer hung in the air. Lily looked at her mother, whose face showed a mixture of relief and hesitation. "We can't accept charity," Nora began. "It's not charity," Thomas interrupted. "It's what my father, our father, would have wanted. What he would have done himself if he had known about Lily." "There will be questions," Lily said quietly. "People will talk if the famous Thomas Green suddenly has a sister from nowhere." Thomas looked her straight in the eye. "Let them talk. I'm not ashamed of you or your mother. The question is, are you ready for what comes with being a Green? The good and the bad?" Lily thought about her simple life, her dreams of college that had seemed impossible just a week ago, and this new brother who represented a world she'd never imagined entering. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready," she admitted honestly. "But I'd like to find out who I am, who we are, together." Thomas smiled, and for the first time, Lily saw not the billionaire businessman, but her brother. A brother who wore their father's ring, just as her mother had kept its twin all these years, waiting for a truth that had finally come to light. The room fell into a heavy silence. Lily sat down slowly, her legs suddenly too weak to hold her. The world as she knew it had just turned upside down. Thomas Green wasn't just some rich businessman, he was her brother. "I need some air," Lily finally said, standing up and walking to the small balcony that overlooked the street below. The night air was cool against her hot face. Thomas watched her go, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. He had come here looking for answers about a ring, and had instead found a sister he never knew existed. A sister who had grown up in poverty while he had enjoyed every privilege money could buy. "Why didn't you ever try to contact the Green family?" Thomas asked Nora quietly. "After my father died, after my grandfather passed away 10 years ago, you could have come forward." Nora shook her head sadly. "And say what?" "That I was your father's secret love? That Lily was his daughter? Who would have believed me? Your family lawyers would have crushed us." "I would have believed you," Thomas said firmly. "The ring is proof enough." "It's just jewelry, Thomas. Expensive jewelry, but still just an object. Your grandfather could have claimed I stole it." Thomas ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that Nora felt her heart ache. "We need to be sure," he said finally. "For all our sakes. Would you and Lily agree to a DNA test?" From the balcony, Lily turned around. "A DNA test? Like on those TV shows?" Thomas nodded. "It's simple and quick these days. A cheek swab results in a few days. I have connections that can make it private and fast." "And what happens after?" Lily asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "If it shows we are related, what then?" It was a question Thomas hadn't fully considered. What would change? Everything. Nothing. He looked at this young woman who might be his sister, working in a cafe to support her sick mother while he ran a billion-dollar company from a penthouse office. "Then we figure it out," he said simply. "Together. As a family should." 3 days later, Thomas's private doctor confirmed what they already knew in their hearts. The DNA test showed Thomas and Lily shared a father. They were half-siblings with a 99.9% certainty. Thomas arranged to meet them at a quiet, upscale restaurant where they could talk privately. He arrived early, securing a corner booth away from curious ears. When Lily and Nora arrived, he noticed Lily looked like she hadn't slept. "Are you okay?" he asked as they sat down. "Just processing," Lily replied. "It's not every day you find out you're half-billionaire." She gave a small laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I brought something to show you both," Thomas said, pulling out a thick photo album. "These are pictures of my father, our father, that my mother kept hidden after he died. I found them in storage last year, but never really looked through them until now." Together, the three of them turned pages filled with moments from Richard Green's life. Nora pointed to a photo of Richard on a sailboat. "He loved the water," she said softly. Said it was the only place he could truly think. Lily studied a picture of Richard holding a young Thomas on his shoulders at what looked like a fair. "He seems kind," she observed. "His eyes are smiling, not just his mouth." "He was kind," Thomas confirmed. "At least to me. My grandfather was the hard one, all business, no warmth. After my father died, that's all I knew." As they continued through the album, Lily noticed something change in Thomas. The stiff businessman who had first come to their apartment was softening with each memory shared. "You know," Thomas said, looking at Lily, "you have his laugh. I heard it when you made that joke just now." Lily smiled, surprised and touched. "Really? Mom always said I'd laugh like her brother, my Uncle Pete." "Maybe both," Nora suggested. "But your determination, that's all Richard. He never gave up on anything he believed in." Thomas closed the album gently. there's something else we need to discuss. Lily, I want to pay for your college education. And Nora, I've arranged for you to see the best neurologist in the country for your Parkinson's." The offer hung in the air. Lily looked at her mother, whose face showed a mixture of relief and hesitation. "We can't accept charity," Nora began. "It's not charity," Thomas interrupted. "It's what my father, our father, would have wanted. What he would have done himself if he had known about Lily." "There will be questions," Lily said quietly. "People will talk if the famous Thomas Green suddenly has a sister from nowhere." Thomas looked her straight in the eye. "Let them talk. I'm not ashamed of you or your mother. The question is, are you ready for what comes with being a Green? The good and the bad." Lily thought about her simple life, her dreams of college that had seemed impossible just a week ago, and this new brother who represented a world she'd never imagined entering. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready," she admitted honestly. "But I'd like to find out who I am, who we are, together." Thomas smiled, and for the first time, Lily saw not the billionaire businessman, but her brother. A brother who wore their father's ring, just as her mother had kept its twin all these years, waiting for a truth that had finally come to light. News travels fast in a company, especially when it involves the boss. Within a week of the DNA test, whispers began circulating through the hallways of Green Enterprises. Thomas's assistant noticed his suddenly packed personal calendar. His driver reported dropping him off at an address in Westbrook, not exactly a neighborhood where billionaires typically spent their time. Thomas was in a board meeting when his phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Mom's first appointment with the specialist went well. They think a new medication might help with the tremors." A small smile crossed his face as he typed back, "Great news. Dinner tonight to celebrate." Across the table, Patricia Winters, the company's longest-serving board member and close friend of Thomas's stepmother, noticed the exchange. Patricia had been with Green Enterprises since Richard's time and prided herself on knowing everything about the Green family. "You seem distracted today, Thomas," she remarked as the meeting wrapped up. "Anything the board should be concerned about?" "Not at all," Thomas replied smoothly, sliding his phone into his pocket. "Just some personal matters I'm attending to." Patricia's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. "Personal matters? That's unlike you." Thomas had planned to introduce Lily and Nora to the company gradually, but he was beginning to realize that secrets had done enough damage to his family already. "Actually, Patricia, there is something. I've recently discovered I have a half-sister. My father had another daughter before he died." Patricia's composed expression cracked for just a moment. "That's quite an announcement. Does Eleanor know?" Eleanor Green, Thomas's stepmother who had remarried after Richard's death, still held considerable Green Enterprises shares and sat on the board emeritus. She had raised Thomas after his mother died when he was 12, but their relationship had always been more functional than warm. "Not yet," Thomas admitted. "I wanted to be certain before opening old wounds." "Well," Patricia said, gathering her leather portfolio, "you might want to tell her before someone else does. News like this affects share prices, Thomas. The board won't be pleased if this becomes a public scandal." Thomas felt a flicker of anger. "My sister isn't a scandal, Patricia. She's family." Later that evening, Thomas arrived at Nora and Lily's apartment with takeout from one of the city's best restaurants. He'd been coming by nearly every day, getting to know the sister he'd missed growing up with and the woman his father had loved. "You look stressed," Nora observed as she set out plates on their small dining table, a far cry from Thomas's 12-person mahogany dining set. "Trouble at work?" "Nothing I can't handle," Thomas assured her, but Lily wasn't convinced. "It's because of us, isn't it?" she asked directly. "People are starting to ask questions." Thomas sighed. "My father's widow, Eleanor, she's going to find out soon. I should be the one to tell her, but I'm not sure how." "Will she be angry?" Lily asked, serving the food that would have cost her nearly a week's salary. "Eleanor is complicated," Thomas explained. "She and my father had already separated once before he met your mother. Their reconciliation was my grandfather's doing, from what I understand now. She's not a warm person, but she was fair to me growing up." "You don't have to tell her about us," Nora said quietly. "We've managed all these years. We can keep things as they are." Thomas shook his head firmly. "No more secrets. Secrets kept you and my father apart. Secrets kept me from knowing my sister for 17 years. I won't let that happen anymore. The next day, Thomas invited Eleanor to lunch at her favorite restaurant. At 72, Elena Green remained an elegant, imposing woman who commanded respect in any room she entered. "This is a surprise," she said as she took her seat across from Thomas. "You usually only schedule lunch when quarterly reports are due." Thomas smiled tightly. "This isn't about business, Eleanor. It's about my father." Elena stiffened almost imperceptibly. Richard has been gone for almost 30 years. What could possibly have come up now? "I've met someone," Thomas began carefully. "A woman named Nora Wilson. She knew my father back in 1994. Eleanor's hand paused midway to her water glass. "The name isn't familiar." "She was his secretary for a time," Thomas continued. "She has a daughter, my half-sister." The silence that followed felt endless. Eleanor's face remained impassive, but Thomas could see her knuckles whitening around her water glass. "I see," she finally said. "And you've confirmed this, I assume?" "DNA test. She's my father's daughter without question." Eleanor took a careful sip of water. "What do these people want?" "Nothing," Thomas replied, feeling defensive on Lily's behalf. "They didn't even know who I was until I approached them. Nora never told Lily who her father was." "How very convenient," Eleanor said dryly. "And now? Will there be a press release announcing the new green hair?" "Lily isn't looking to be an heir," Thomas said firmly. "But she is my sister, and I intend to help with her education and her mother's medical care." "Your personal money is your business," Eleanor said with a dismissive wave. "But keep the company out of it. The board won't take kindly to surprises like this, especially when share prices are at stake." Thomas leaned forward. "Is that all you have to say? Don't you want to know about her? She has his eyes, Eleanor." His laugh. Something flickered across Eleanor's face, pain or regret, Thomas couldn't tell which. "What good would that do any of us?" she asked quietly. "The past is past. Richard made his choices." "Did he?" Thomas challenged. "Or did grandfather make them for him? Did you know grandfather threatened Nora to make her leave?" Eleanor looked away. "Your grandfather did what he thought was best for the family, for the company." "At what cost?" Thomas pressed. "Did my father even want to reconcile with you? Or was that grandfather's doing too?" Eleanor stood abruptly. "I think we're done here. I won't contest whatever arrangements you make for this girl, but don't expect me to welcome her with open arms. Some wounds never heal, Thomas." As she walked away, Thomas realized just how complicated family could be, the one you're born into and the one you find along the way. The morning newspaper hit Thomas's desk with a slap. His assistant, Penny, stood there with concern written across her face. "You might want to see this," she said. The headline jumped out at him. "Green HEI Disco Vios Cities Rate SSISTR from wrong side of TRACKS." Below was a photo of Thomas leaving Lily and Nora's apartment building. Thomas felt his heart sink. How did they get this? "I don't know," Penny said, "but your phone's been ringing nonstop. The PR department is in panic mode." Thomas picked up the paper, scanning the article. Someone had leaked details about Lily and Nora, not just their existence, but specifics about the DNA test and Richard's relationship with Nora years ago. There were even quotes from sources close to the Green family, suggesting that Nora had been a gold digger who had waited until the perfect moment to reveal Lily's existence. "This is garbage," Thomas growled. "Call legal. I want to know our options." Across town, Lily stepped out of her apartment building to find 3 reporters waiting. Camera flashes blinded her as questions came from all directions. "Lily, how long have you known you're a Green? Did your mother keep you a secret to get money? How much is Thomas paying you to keep quiet?" Lily froze, completely unprepared. She'd been a nobody yesterday, just a cafe worker trying to make ends meet. Today, she was apparently news. A car horn honked, and she saw Mrs. Chen from the cafe waving frantically. "Lily, get in." Lily dashed to the car, grateful for the escape. "What's happening?" she gasped as they drove away. "It's all over the news," Mrs. Chen explained. "Someone talked to the papers about you and that rich man." At school, Lily found herself the center of unwanted attention. Classmates who had barely spoken to her before suddenly wanted to be her friend. Teachers looked at her differently. Even the principal called her into his office to check how she was handling the attention. By lunchtime, Lily had enough. She texted Thomas, "Need to talk. This is too much." Thomas responded immediately, "On my way." 20 minutes later, his sleek car pulled up outside the school. Lily slipped out a side door to meet him. "I'm so sorry," were Thomas's first words as she got into the car. "I never wanted this for you." "Who would do this?" Lily asked, her voice small. "Tell such awful lies about Mom." Thomas's jaw tightened. "I have my suspicions. This has Eleanor written all over it. Your stepmother, why would she do this?" "Control," Thomas said simply. "She's always been afraid of losing her position in the Green family. A new green hair, especially one with a claim through Richard directly, threatens that." "But I don't want anything," Lily protested. "I just wanted to know my father, to understand where I came from." "I know," Thomas said gently. "But people like Eleanor don't understand that not everyone cares about money and power." When they arrived at the penthouse office of Green Enterprises, Thomas's lawyer, David, was waiting. His face was grave. "Eleanor's lawyers have filed a petition," David said without preamble. "They're challenging the DNA test results and suggesting that Nora manipulated you into accepting Lily without proper verification." "That's ridiculous," Thomas snapped. "I arranged the test myself." "Through a private lab," David pointed out. "Eleanor's team is demanding a court-supervised test and a full investigation into Nora's past." Lily felt sick. "They want to investigate my mom, like she's a criminal." "It's a standard tactic," David explained. "Drag things out, make it messy, hope you'll give up." "Well, I won't," Thomas declared. "And neither will Lily." "Actually," David continued, "there's more. Eleanor held a board meeting this morning. As majority shareholder, she suggested a vote of no confidence in your leadership, claiming your judgment has been compromised by emotional family matters." Thomas stared in disbelief. "She's trying to push me out of my own company." "She can't do that," Lily said, "can she?" "With enough board support, yes," David admitted. "Your fathers will give Eleanor significant power, Thomas. Power she's never fully exercised until now." Thomas paced the office, his mind racing. Everything he built, everything his father had created, was at risk because he'd wanted to do the right thing by his sister. "What are our options?" he finally asked. David hesitated. "Legally, we fight, but," he glanced at Lily. "The simplest solution would be for Lily and her mother to publicly deny the connection. Eleanor would back down if the problem went away." Lily's heart sank. After finally finding her brother, her father's legacy, she was being asked to give it all up. "No," Thomas said firmly, seeing Lily's expression. "We're not denying anything. We're Greens. And Greens don't back down." He turned to Lily, his father's determination reflected in both their eyes. "Are you with me?" Lily nodded, realizing that the simple life she'd known was gone forever. Family sticks together. That's what Mom always taught me. Rain poured down as Thomas walked through the old storage facility. The key in his hand was small and tarnished, the last key on his father's keyring that he'd never known the purpose of. Until now. 2 days after Eleanor's attack in the boardroom, Penny had discovered something interesting while going through old company records. Richard Green had maintained a private storage unit separate from the family's holdings. The payments came automatically from an account Thomas hadn't known existed. The unit was small and tucked away in a corner. Thomas turned the key and the lock clicked open. Inside, dust covered everything, boxes of papers, old furniture, and a large antique desk that Thomas recognized from photos of his father's first office. "What am I looking for?" Thomas muttered to himself, flipping on the dimmer overhead light. He'd come alone, wanting this moment of connection with his father without lawyers or assistants hovering. This was where his father had kept his personal treasures, things that mattered to him beyond business. The desk drew Thomas's attention. It was solid wood with intricate carvings, far more ornate than the modern furniture Richard had used in later years. Thomas ran his hands along its surface, feeling the craftsmanship. On impulse, he pulled open the top drawer. Empty. So were the second and third drawers. Thomas frowned, disappointed. He'd hoped for something. Some clue, some proof that would silence Eleanor once and for all. The court-ordered DNA test was scheduled for next week, but Thomas knew that Eleanor would find other ways to fight even after the results confirmed what they already knew. As he started to close the last drawer, Thomas noticed something odd. The drawer seemed too shallow compared to the others. He tapped the bottom, hearing a hollow sound. His heart beating faster, he pressed the edges of the drawer's bottom panel until one side popped up, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a leather-bound journal and a sealed envelope with "For Thomas" written in his father's handwriting. Thomas's hands trembled as he opened the envelope first. Inside was a letter dated just days before his father's fatal car accident. "My son," it began, "if you're reading this, something has happened to me. There are truths you need to know that I've been too afraid to tell you face to face." The letter detailed everything: Richard's love for Nora, his devastation when she disappeared, his father's threats and manipulation, and his suspicion that Nora might have been pregnant when she left. Richard wrote that he had tried to find her, but his father had interfered. The reconciliation with Eleanor had been forced by his father's threats to disinherit Thomas if Richard didn't comply. Most importantly, Richard had left clear instructions. If Nora ever returns, or if you ever discover she had my child, they are to be acknowledged as family and given their rightful place in our lives. Thomas sat on the dusty floor, tears streaming down his face as he finally heard his father's true voice after all these years. The journal contained more: photos of Nora, love letters, and Richard's private thoughts about the family business and his hopes for Thomas. It was everything they needed to prove that Richard had never forgotten Nora, that he had intended to find her again. That evening, Thomas called an emergency family meeting at his home. Lily and Nora arrived first, followed by a suspicious Eleanor. "What's this about, Thomas?" Eleanor demanded as she took a seat as far from Nora as possible. "It's about ending this fight," Thomas said calmly. "I found my father's private storage unit." He placed the journal and letter on the coffee table. Eleanor's face paled as she recognized her late husband's handwriting. Richard left explicit instructions about what should happen if Lily was discovered, Thomas explained. He wanted her recognized as his daughter. He wanted Nora to be treated with respect. Eleanor's hands twisted in her lap. "You could have forged those." "The notary stamp and signature are genuine," Thomas replied. "And there's more." He turned to a specific page in the journal. "He knew Eleanor. He knew that you were aware of Nora from the beginning. He wrote that you agreed to the reconciliation to protect your social position, not out of love." Eleanor's carefully maintained composure cracked. "What was I supposed to do? Your grandfather made it clear that if Richard didn't come back, the company would suffer. Thousands of jobs were at stake. My comfortable lifestyle was at stake." Her voice broke. "I did what I had to do. At the expense of my mother's happiness," Lily said quietly, "and my chance to know my father." Eleanor couldn't meet her eyes. The girl looked so much like Richard it was painful to see. "The board meeting is tomorrow," Thomas said firmly. "You have a choice, Eleanor. We can present a united front, welcome Lily properly as Richard's daughter and my sister, acknowledge Nora's place in his life, and move forward as a family. Or I can read my father's journal entries aloud to the board, including his thoughts about your arrangement." It wasn't really a choice, and they all knew it. The next day, Thomas and Eleanor stood side by side at the board meeting. Eleanor spoke first, her voice steady. "I wish to withdraw my motion of no confidence in Thomas's leadership," she announced. "Furthermore, I want to officially welcome Lily Wilson as Richard Green's daughter and a member of our family." Whispers rippled through the boardroom as Thomas stepped forward. "My sister Lily will be joining Green Enterprises after she completes her education," he announced. "My father would have wanted his daughter to have the same opportunities I had." Patricia Winters studied Thomas carefully. "And the rumors about the ring?" "That Ms. Wilson has one identical to yours." Thomas and Lily exchanged a glance, both touching their emerald rings. Lily now wore her mother's, a gift from Nora to mark her acceptance of her heritage. "The rings were meant to be together," Thomas said simply, "just like our family." 3 months later, Lily and Nora moved into a comfortable house near Thomas's home, not too extravagant but safe and large enough for Nora's medical equipment. Lily had started college with Thomas's full support, studying business and art, finding her own path while getting to know her brother. Each Sunday they gathered for dinner. Thomas, Lily, Nora, and sometimes even Eleanor, who was slowly warming to the idea of an extended family. They kept both emerald rings on the table during these meals, a reminder of the love that had created their unlikely family and the chance comment in a cafe that had brought them together. "To Dad," Thomas would say, raising his glass. "To Dad," Lily would echo, the rings catching the light just as they had decades ago when Richard had first given one to the woman he loved.